I don't know if anyone can hear me at the moment. Please post in chat if you are able to hear me. Okay, so hi guys, welcome to this week's sort of like talk on OpenVas. We're going to be talking a little bit about what it is and why people would use it. I'm not going to be doing full demonstrations because we're having some little bits of technical issues, and we're going to be doing a more in-depth thing if we can get it to work next week or the week after, because we've got some new guests coming in. We've got 2 guests lined up for the 11th and the week after that, I think. And they're going to be coming in and talking, one about mobile security, and the other one has yet to tell us what their topic is. But we're going to be talking a bit about OpenVas and stuff like that, so that's all good. So, again, our standard disclaimer applies. Please do not use this for anything that you will end up going out and learning or doing anything like that, because this is all for educational purposes. So, the stuff we are going to be covering today could end you up in getting you in trouble with the police and stuff like that, because we are going to be doing some live hacking and exploiting vulnerabilities that are on systems and stuff like that. So that's towards the end. We're going to be covering Nikto. We're going to be covering, as I say, a little bit about OpenVas. My stream is lagging. Okay, there we go. So OpenVas, renamed to Greenbone Vulnerability Manager. Nikto, Ryan is going to be doing some Postman, HTTP stuff, and some API manipulation. And then we're going to have a bunch of live hacking demos at the end. So, first of all, we need to understand what a CVE is. So, a CVE is a sort of like a common vulnerability. So, there are a list of predefined vulnerabilities that are all accessible and out on the internet. So these predefined vulnerabilities are for every kind of system you can possibly imagine, from ATMs to PHP to websites to absolutely everything you can possibly imagine. And these will also tell you how important they are to get them fixed. So some of them can be as simple as a 1 frame or 2 frame per second like lag on a system. Some of these can be completely destroying to your company and can wipe all of your servers completely dry. And it allows you to invest and sort of like work out where the time and the money should be spent when you are defending your own systems. These can also have proof of concepts, so that you can go and actually download these exploits or see how they actually work. These are rare, but they do exist out there, so it's always worth, if you find that there is a CVE for something, go and have a look. This is important because OpenVas checks about 50,000 of these when it's doing a scan. So what is OpenVas? It's an open source vulnerability assessment tool. So what that means is it's an automatic lazy hacker. So what it means is that when it goes out, it will sort of like run all of these pre-generated tests. It will check if it's got cross-site scripting. It'll check if it's acceptable to any of these CVEs. And it's open source. So it means that we can go in, have a look at it, and if we don't like something, we can change it a little bit, because all of the code is out there and can be downloaded from GitHub. It can be augmented with modules and plugins. So if you are testing particular kinds of systems, then you can go away and test these individual kinds of systems with different modules or plugins supplied by the people that want to make them. So it was renamed to Greenbone Vulnerability Manager in 2019, and it is a automated hacker. It will check your web application, so things like YouTube, Facebook. They use a much more sophisticated one of these, but they do use them. And then if you are looking at working as a cybersecurity consultant, you'll probably end up with some kind of automated scanner that once a week, once a month, or once every single day will check for these kind of new exploits that come out overnight and check if any of your servers are available to them. It can check hosts on a network. So if the machine is like your gaming machine, your laptop, something like that, it can be sat there on your desk and it will automatically scan them and check if your individual machines are accessible to these hacks, or if you are doing networks. So it can scan an entire subnet or an entire sort of like large amount of data and check to make sure whether or whether not anything on the entire network is going to go down. So when it's testing web apps, It's testing for cross-site scripting. It's testing for URL enumeration. So it's going to be brute forcing parts of URLs to look for /admin/logon, anything of interest that is done in a standard format. It will be checking. It will be probing the host that the websites are on, and if it is sort of like load balanced across multiple servers, it can also do that. And it will be looking for host exploitation. So whether we can just, instead of trying to get log on, and you can go straight onto something else. So the install process is very, very complicated. And if you are struggling to find it, I recommend you download the Docker containers, as they are so much more easy because there are so many steps to doing your setup. And because it is now a mix between OpenVas and GVM, that some of the commands don't work nicely together. And you need to then start upgrading your databases, your Redis services, and everything like that. Them from Docker containers. So if you've used Docker before, this is quite useful. This one's been pulled about 170,000 times, and it was updated as recently as yesterday, and it's sort of like a management interface for it. This one is quite nitty gritty.
Matt, we can't hear you.
Then you have to set it up using the arguments.
At least I can't on Discord.
This one here, which is someone else's, it was updated a little bit longer ago, but it seems to work perfectly fine once you have spent hours installing all of your update packages, because they are all limited.
Yeah, but I couldn't hear your mic at all.
The easiest way I would have said is head over to the OpenVas website or the Greenbone Vulnerability Scanner website. Head over to your virtual appliance thing, and you can download your ISO file. So your ISO file is your installer, sort of like it installs a completely separate virtual machine, and you can try and install it using this. I have yet to give it a go, so I don't know how easy or hard it is, but I believe because it's just an ISO, it should be relatively easy. But the manual installation way is quite nitty-gritty, as well as some Docker containers. This one is quite easy. The secure compliance one is a little bit harder. So I don't know if you can actually hear that. So as I think my whole computer's glitching right now. OpenVas has hundreds of different attack vectors that it's probably going to follow. So it's got at least 50,000 pre-installed, and these are the things that take all the time. So these are your limited downloads that are normally limited to about 200k a second, and these will be all of your individual updates, but it is quite difficult to get to manage and stuff. So I'll be going over OpenVas in quite a bit more depth, sort of like how to run scans and that towards the end if we have time, or if not, I'll be talking about it on Discord. Here we have the GVM scanner. I'm just going to quickly talk through it in case you do install it on your own. So once it's installed, it's got a nice little web UI with a dashboard of all of your different things. So you're going to go into your configuration, you're going to get a new target, you're going to put in the IP address, you're going to put in your name scan. It is going to then head up into your target list. So your target list, you can have hundreds of different machines and just click on them individually at will. You can schedule them to scan once a week. So I do this for my home IPs. So once a week, I set it off to go and do a scan, and it'll come back to me and tell me if anything has changed on my network. So on our Metasploitable scan, it's just a one-off scan, so we don't need to do anything really on it. So here we have our sort of like vulnerabilities by high to low, and it is live. So this was after about half a second, it found a high vulnerability. So when you are currently doing or attacking machines on your own network and stuff like that, you need to make sure that your devices are in bridged mode, because it gives it its own independent IP on the network. So as you can see on this screen, I am going to be quickly just filling in and marking. You need to make sure that your bridged area is ticked, and here you need to change it from NAT to bridged mode. So your NAT will just use a port reflection thing. You will learn more about this when you go into some more NetTech stuff. But if you are hacking or want to be doing anything, you have to have your things on bridged mode. it means that it simulates a real computer instead of it being a virtual machine inside of a just on a random port on your host adapter. So what we're going to be scanning, we are going to be using a machine called Metasploitable 2. So Metasploitable 2 is a pre-made, incredibly vulnerable machine. Please do not expose it to the internet. Please do not just leave it on when you aren't using it, because it is so vulnerable. If a malicious person is doing anything anywhere near your network, it can be very easily brute forced onto, or as I'm going to be showing you later, there are a bunch of other methods to be able to get onto this. So netdiscover, Nmap, info from your router, or log on the box and check that you are attacking the right IP. So your Nmap will be able to show you sort of like what ports are running, what services are running, everything like that. netdiscover just tracks every host on the network. Info from your router, it can give it its host name, which will be Metasploitable, and its IP address link. And then if you log on the box and just have a check with the password that is on the web interface, you can also check that way to make sure that you have the right machine before you start attacking. So this is Metasploitable. It is a very easy to hack into machine, and it's incredibly low power and RAM usage. So when you first download it, it'll say it requires half a gig of RAM. You can turn that all the way down to about 200 meg before it starts lagging a little bit when you're running attacks. If you give it more, it just handles attacks faster. So here we have just sort of like the splash screen. So I'm running it in VMware, and it is incredibly easy just to log on to and start playing with. So as I say, we started unmapping our scan. So here I will go through my scan options just in case you want to. So I'm saying even if it doesn't respond to pings, let it respond to pings. What OS, what version number, I don't care about being stealthy because I am literally sat on the same network as my machine, and then the IP address. So here it brings a lot upon a lot of different sort of like of services and stuff, and I'm going to be showing you how to exploit some of them. So VSFTPD, an old version, this initially shipped with a backdoor pre-included on it from some unknown hacker, and I'm going to be showing you how to go through that later. And as you can see here, at the moment, this is important for later, there is no 6200 port open. This is incredibly important just to keep a quick think about it, but there isn't anything there. What else is interesting on here? We have VNC, which is the remote desktop protocol equivalent for Windows on Linux. It means that you can log in and sort of like use the machine as if you were there. Telnet is an insecure version of SSH, so in other words, all of the passwords and everything are sent without any encryption, and you can read them if you are trying to grab the data like a man-in-the-middle attack like I was showing you the other week. It's running some web servers, so they might be some vulnerable web apps, and it's running a couple of different FTP servers. So this is all quite important information that is quite useful. So we have Pro FTP down here. So as I say, you are just looking at Nmap to come back with all of your information, so that then you can start looking and pivoting off from your Nmap, which is your initial scan. So for the web apps, you can run a couple of tools. As I say, these aren't especially OpenVas, but these are sort of like a similar sort of thing. So a gobuster or a dirbuster will just start brute forcing URLs. So instead of like it'll check the URL /info/login/admin, and it'll go through like that thousands of times a second, depending on how fast you set it. Nikto is sort of like your B2 first of all stop for doing any kind of web app testing. So I'll be showing you a quick screenshot of that and what it's going to come back with, but it is incredibly useful for looking at stuff like this. Your Metasploitable 2 is sort of like just the basic splash screen, and it has a bunch of pre-made links that I'm going to be covering later. So you've got your admin portal for sort of like your databases and everything like that, and then a couple of inbuilt web services that are pre-made and vulnerable so that you can go away and try and check. Here as well, you have your admin sort of like password and username so that you can go on the box and check that you are going to be attacking the right machine before you just start hammering away at some random machine. So this is Nikto. Nikto, as I say, is your sort of like your first stop when you're doing any kind of web app testing. So it will go through and it will check for cross-site scripting. It will go through and start doing a little bit of sort of like directory traversal if it knows what it's looking for. It knows that it's SQL databases, and the most important thing that it can probably give you is your changelog if there is one. So changelog will allow you to see the exact version and things that your website is running. So here I'm just going to leave this up to see if you can spot anything else that might be interesting, because I can see a couple of things that are relatively interesting. Okay, so you can go through the user docs, you can look at some of the sensitive information, and Ryan will be covering a little bit more about HTTP requests and stuff like that in a minute, but there's also readmes, info, test directories, everything like that. So as I say, the changelog is very, very interesting. So changelog allows us to see exactly what version is running, so then we can search for the actual vulnerabilities that are fully accessible to this site. So whether that be on Searchsploit or MSF console or going through CVEs, or we can literally very quickly find, narrow down, and start running some exploits to make sure what does and does not work. So to access the Searchsploit console, you are just doing sudo Searchsploit. So we can quite easily go off from here. So SQL injection, cross-site scripting requests, all of that kind of stuff. We can see when we search Searchsploit for PHP my admin, there is a version that will work perfectly well with what version is running on their site. And if not, there are a bunch of other exploits within a version number L2 that can also or may not work for us. So when we check just the default login page, encryption is giving us a slight error, which is not the greatest thing in the world, especially if this is on a real commercial system. Be glad it isn't, because as I say, this machine being on makes it incredibly, incredibly easy to brute force get into and destroy. So here I'm going to be showing you some life hacks. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to get into the system, and then there's a lot more that aren't included in this video so that you can go away, figure it out by yourselves. We're going to be in Discord afterwards talking about all of it, but there's a lot of stuff on this system that can be broken into, abused, or stuff like that. There was a bunch of services running on this. If we look at port 21, it's just FTP, but it's a specific kind of FTP that was VSFTP. And if you look back at that kind of FTP server, it's shipped with an initial backdoor that some unknown hacker put in, and it was never found out who it was. But then when this system went out to the world and got installed on a bunch of machines, this backdoor was around so that people could exploit it and sort of like mess around with it. So that's all fine and good because we as hackers know that it's running on this server. So to do the attack, you are going to be telnetting into the server, but not onto the standard port. You are going to be porting into the FTP server, and it's going to sort of say, okay, what do you want us to do now? You're going to specify your user, which is a backdoor, with a smiley face. The smiley face is the main important part. The smiley face allows you to sort of like initialize the exploit. So when you have put your smiley face in, you're just going to give it an invalid password. And it's going to hang there for a second whilst it thinks about what you've done. So on this, we're then just going to spawn another terminal. You can do that by Control-Alt-T, and then you're going to telnet back into the box using the same port. The same IP, but a different port. You're going to be porting into 6200, and this is going to say, okay, what have you done? What is this? So I'm going to be doing IDs. Was one way people would get onto the system. There's another couple of ways I'm going to be showing as well. So that was the first way into the system. So that was taking advantage of a backdoor that was pre-installed on the system. And when you got that prompt where you could do ID and then a semicolon, you are technically fully in a backdoor. So ID just means that we have sort of like some form of access. We don't know whether that's high level access, whether that's low level access, but we know that we have some kind of access. So I'm just going to be quickly showing you how a couple of different ways you can get into this Metasploitable box. So starting off, I have my default Kali terminal. This is going to be exploiting part of the system that it is based on for its SSH keys. So when we did our Nmap scan, we saw that ports 512, 513, and 514 are open, and these are service ports. If you do a little bit of digging in the background, you'll be able to find out that these are using our hosts plus a situation, sort of like attack vector. So it means that if you try and log in, so if you SSH into the box or attempt to 192.168.175, it'll sort of say, "Oh, sorry, but we need your password." Okay, that's fine. So we know that it's got at least some kind of service on it. But when we log in, what's using our login? So our login is a different sort of like SSH client, and it passes your own authentication on to it. So you are running it as sudo, so you're making yourself the root user, and then logging into SSH using our login, which passes your sort of like your credentials over to it, to the IP address. And it just lets us straight in because it is passing our own authentication as our root user over into their box. So that's the first really easy way to get into the box. So that is exploiting sort of the inherent weakness of using random programs on it. So these three programs that were running together created something that allowed us just to work our way in by using a program that wasn't intended for it. So we're just logging in using our login that can be installed straight from your command line. Metasploit console is sort of like your go-to first step. Once you've figured out what versions of things are running, or if you can't figure out an easy brute force into the system, this is when you'll start doing sort of like slightly more advanced hacking techniques. So here we have what's called a Metasploit console. So the Metasploit console is sort of like a framework or a large amount of data that can be used to have pre-generated hacks or something that enables quite a lot of devices to be broken into remotely. So at the moment it has 2,000 exploits. These can be easily added and removed because there's a lot of them. So here we have a Unix one that is going through IRC that is setting what is called a remote host. The remote host is the machine that we want to attack. So as you can see here, when we initially tried to connect to that port, it didn't work until we initialized our sort of like dodgy hack through Telnet, where we included a smiley face that is completely leet speak. It then allowed us to sort of like put through the hack. So I just used this time and not pass, and then ended up reconnecting to the port, and it gave us our ID. So this enables us to be shown that the exploit worked. We have a basic backdoor into the system, but we can't do a lot from here. So we can try and do who am I, and it says we are root. So we technically have a full backdoor, which is quite nice. But when we're the root user, we can do anything we want. So MSF console can automate the process. So if you were doing it on this one, you would use the Unix IRC on real backdoor exploit. It won't actually work at the moment for us because, as I say, we already technically are on that port and are occupying it. So when we are already using the port, the exploit won't work. But if we were trying to use that exploit without trying to go through the initial telnet and mitigation strategy there, the exploit would let us in and give us a root admin console. Instead, we are using the telnet method, so it also works. So as I was saying, that there are a lot of things on this machine that can be exploited. So some of them, as we were talking about earlier, are web apps. So here we have a couple of different sort of like full web apps that are meant to be deliberately vulnerable. So this one is using what is the OWASP POP10. So that is going to be SQL, cross-site scripting, and a couple of other things vulnerable. It's going to be sort of like telling you to how to do it almost, but not quite. So then we have another very vulnerable one that may or may not be exploitable using cross-site scripting as well, but they have sort of different tiers. So going through, you have your easy, medium, medium plus. None of these are especially ridiculously hard, but some of them are quite intimidating. So as I say, there are a lot of sort of like web app vulnerability stuff on here as well, and I'll be including a video of scanning them with Nikto as well. The Greenbone Security Assistant or the vulnerability scanner can be installed on your local machine as well, and this sort of automates most of the process that you just saw. It doesn't exploit anything for you, but it tells you exactly kind of which ones to use, what to search on your CVE pages, all of that kind of stuff. So your CVE pages are right here, and you can just quickly scroll through, and if all of a sudden you know that a PHP vulnerability for PHP 5.5 is out there, or PHP 3.1 or whatever you want to do, you can quickly just search through here, 3.1, 3.1, done. And you just search through thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of CVE errors. So just for PHP alone on here, there are thousands of matches. So it's quite easy just to go through, find exactly what you're looking for. So this one's PHP MyAdmin version 2.1. As we found out from our vulnerability attack and stuff like that, we can quickly find what the PHP version is. So we can go to changelog. Oh, so we know it's 3.1.0. We can quickly limit and rule out a lot of these attacks, or we can include them for what we know that we want to attack with. So as I was saying, that there are a lot of things on this machine that can be exploited. So I want to say. So as I was going to say, we have a lot of stuff on here. So Ryan is going to be doing some Postman and HTTP manipulation, and then I'm going to be heading over to Discord afterwards. And if you want to go through and see any of those in slower motion or anything like that, please feel free to come along. So Ryan's going to be showing you some of the stuff that you can possibly do with web apps. So it's going to be at least part of API manipulation and stuff like that. So I'm going to be throwing up a blank image on the middle of the screen, and we're going to be heading over to a new stream, and Ryan is going to be dealing with that.
Yep, hopefully all goes well.
I think I had
the
my
link
audio.
in chat.
Okay.
Start stream